Good evening. My name is Eric Robinson, and this is my Interpersonal Communications Project video for HSER 508. To introduce interpersonal communications, we have to use a definition from Stewart's book. That interpersonal communication is defined as the type or kind of communication that happens when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. In other words, a choice has to be made by individuals involved to ensure that this type of interaction is present. In today's society, that can be a daunting task, considering the fact that everyone and everything moves at such a high rate of speed. Everybody has to go here and go there. Next slide, please. As a whole, I think the society has become great talkers, but we're not great listeners. Something that needs to change. Our society has based its communication on what's being said and totally neglected the portion that needs to be heard. Without hearing in detailed manners, all communication can be meaningless rhetoric, which to me equals a ton of white noise. Next slide. The overarching goal for this class, for me in this video, is to listen to others as we or I expect to be listened to. You know, the Bible talks about do not judge others lest you will be judged. In other words, treat the people the way you want to be treated. You know, there's a listening game that I played before being a marriage minister, where you get a group of people in a circle and you start with the very first person, you whisper in their ear and you give them a point to make or a short story and see if that exact story can be portrayed throughout the group. And with a group of 20, it normally gets changed about 4 or 5 times. But reading through the material, I realized that I was that kind of listener. I was the individual that heard the words but really wasn't listening to the content of what people were speaking of, and so that made me a very selfish listener. Next slide, please. What I needed to learn to do was to enlarge my conversation. We were given the assignment to watch the movie Fireproof, and it became more and more evident of where I used to be in my communication. I was just like Caleb, one of the star actors in the movie. Everything was about me. I wanted to hear, about me. I wanted everything to be curtailed to how I wanted things to act. I was very selfish in how I treated my wife. I was very selfish in my actions. I was not a loving individual. Caleb, just like that, was not very loving, so he couldn't hear anything his wife was saying. So, excuse me, to be able to enlarge your conversation, you have to be able to become unselfish, which in today's society, the way things have changed, is not something that's very key or very common. But once you become an unselfish listener, this will allow people to hear without being opinionated or judgmental, which Caleb was in the movie. Some of the ways to help with enlarging the conversation, you have to do a self-assessment. See yourself for who you are. You have to understand who you are and how you interact with others to first see where you are and then be able to correct that problem. We don't like to change. Change is always hard. But when dealing with change, some are hesitant because we don't often like to be taken out of our comfort zone. Peterson has a great tool that is talker listening cards, because it gives you specific instructions as a talker and as a listener on what you should do when interacting in a conversation. As the listener, you have to realize that you do not own the problem. You're just there to listen, not objectively, to focus on the words being said, so the other individual that's talking can speak through the issues that they're having and hopefully use rational thoughts, less emotion, and come up with a solution to their problem. Next slide deals with my background and behavior blend. I'm only child. I grew up in the house of a single mom. Great life. Never regretted the fact, like some single moms and children that are only children, they wish they had siblings. I rather enjoyed my freedom of being alone, and whenever I needed time to go or time with people, I'd go outside and interact with my friends. But being in crowds, those things energize me, and I always loved being around people. My behavior blend is what makes me, I think, unique in the fact that I'm not one that likes to ruffle feathers, but I do like interacting with people. I do like getting into the crowds and enjoying myself, talking to other people. But in doing so, I want everybody to get along. So I feel like I'm almost a moderator or a mediator, so to speak, to make sure everything's on a level playing field, everybody's joyous and harmonious, which can be difficult or can be a problem from my aspect, because if things aren't getting along, I get disheveled, then I get into a place where I can't communicate properly. Next slide. And that leads to some of the potential barriers that I deal with when it comes to interpersonal communication. Being an athlete, growing up, I played football many, many years, baseball and basketball. I've always had that will to win, and I've seen how it's transposed over into my conversation. When somebody challenges me intellectually or in any type of conversation, and I in any way feel disrespected, I'm going to push back. I'm not going to listen, and I start to fight back to prove my point. But becoming a better communicator means that I have to step back and not take things personal. That will to win has to be dropped off. Another thing is that leads to I can't be defensive. When that disrespect arises, I have to realize that what that person is saying is they're trying to get their point across and not necessarily trying to intentionally hurt my feelings. Always, again, like I said, I don't like feathers being ruffled. I don't like bad vibes. So I like to fix things. I like to fix situations between people, and that in itself can be a hindrance, not only to myself, but especially to the person that has an issue. They have to be able to talk through and work through their own issues. Last but not least, which is the biggest thing I deal with on a daily basis, especially spiritually, is acting in arrogance, thinking that I know the answers because of whatever. I have to know, I'm a mere man, and I have to know and understand that I don't have all the answers. And in my arrogance, sometimes my nonverbal communications come across. I may give you a certain look, may shrug my shoulders, may sit back as if I'm not interested, and I have to be real careful in doing those things, and those are some of the potential barriers that I deal with. Another thing that can be a problem in interpersonal personal communication: noise pollution. We talk about noise pollution outside with your cars and traffic, construction and all those, but there's noise pollution that can hinder your interpersonal communication as well. There are internal pollutions and external. For me, internal are my personal beliefs, my values, my belief systems, and how I grew up, my upbringing, also my religious convictions, things that the Bible has taught me, my Christian worldview can be a determinant in how I interact with people. Then there's also the external. This is a shortened list, but there are very many others that can be listed. But family, I got a lovely wife, I've got 3 children, a household to run, I've got in-laws that I talk to often, and can hear them, saying different things. I got a job, social media, oh my God, the news and Facebook and, Google. There's so many ways to talk to people and so many ways to miscommunicate through those external pollutions that things get jumbled up, they become a mess, and that's when your mind gets polluted. Unfortunately, noise is all around us, and it's imperative that we determine how we live in it. One of the major ways that's going to help me is, again, as I mentioned before, those talker listener cards created by Peterson. Next slide. Plan of action. For me, I stated some of these things earlier, but to cover them again, I got to understand that everyone is different, and understand that in different ways, that's how people communicate. Some people aren't great talkers. Some people need time, and so I have to be patient and listen. I have to know thyself, know who I am. Understanding who I am, how I communicate, makes a big difference in a lot of things. And last, I have to be non-judgmental and be careful about all that I do. Thank you for your time, and this has been my interpersonal communications project video for HSER 508. Thank you.